The Sarathi frontier station hung in the void like a jeweled spiderweb spun across the throat of a dead god. Below it, the pale storm world of Iocanthus churned in endless grays and bruise-colored violets, a chaotic backdrop to the practiced elegance of the station above. Trade ships drifted toward the docking arms like fireflies seeking the warmth of a lantern, their engines pulsing with a soft blue light that mirrored the bioluminescence of the station's masters. It was a view that usually cost 1,000 credits a night to see from the upper spires. But Jace had a front-row seat for free because he was currently dangling 300 feet below the primary dorsal strut, welding a loose hull plate that had been clipped by a careless freighter. Jace adjusted the magnetic grip of his boots and wiped a smear of hydraulic fluid from his face shield. He was a man built of sharp angles and scar tissue. 34 years of bad luck wrapped in a standard-issue salvage technician's flight suit. He was human, which on this station meant he was somewhere between a curiosity and a beast of burden. He had the thick, calloused hands of someone who fixed things that wealthy people broke, and eyes that had seen enough combat in the sector wars to look permanently tired. Technically, Jace was a free man. In reality, he was an indentured asset of House Serath, working off a debt that seemed to accrue interest faster than he could weld seams. He tapped his comms unit. "Hey, Vix," he said, his voice rough with the static of the open channel. "I am sealing the strut now. Tell the dockmaster not to repressurize until I am clear, unless he wants to scrape me off the windshield of the next diplomatic cruiser." A chittering laugh came back over the line. Vix was a crustacean-like scavenger from the lower belts, possessing 6 limbs and a sense of humor that was mostly incomprehensible to humans. "The dockmaster cares little for your squishy physiology." "Jace," Vix replied, "but I will inform him. Try not to die. It is lunch hour soon." Jace grunted and sparked his torch. The blue flame hissed against the vacuum-hardened alloy. This was his life. Wake up in the lower habitats. Eat processed protein paste that tasted like wet cardboard. Climb into a vac suit and fix the shining towers of the Sarathi nobility until his muscles burned. He finished the weld and retracted his mag lines, drifting back toward the maintenance airlock. As he clambered inside and the pressure cycled, he stripped off his helmet, running a hand through sweat-matted dark hair. The air inside the station smelled of ozone, recycled jasmine, and the faint metallic tang of starship exhaust. Inside the locker room, other workers were peeling off their gear. It was a mix of species, stocky, furred laborers from the heavy gravity worlds, insectoid technicians, and a few other humans who looked just as worn out as Jace. "Did you hear?" a human mechanic named Davin asked, leaning against a row of lockers. "The High Council is sitting today. Rumor is they are debating the Rights of Sentience Act again," Jace scoffed, shoving his helmet into its cradle. "They can debate all they want. To them, we are just tools that talk." Davin lowered his voice, looking around nervously. "It is not just politics. I heard the scullery workers talking. The Matriarchs are arguing over the prophecy again. The one about the stranger with iron in his hands." "Fairy tales," Jace said, zipping down his suit to reveal a grease-stained undershirt. "They are bored, Davin. When you live for 300 years and glow in the dark, you have to invent drama to pass the time." But the tension was real. Jace could feel it as he walked the corridor toward the mess hall. The Sarathi were a matriarchal species, tall and slender, with skin that held a faint inner luminescence ranging from soft pearlescent white to deep, regal violet. They moved with a fluid grace that made humans look like stumbling drunks. The men were deferential, the women imperious, and lately, they looked at humans with a mixture of disdain and fear. He stepped out onto a promenade overlooking the central atrium. It was a vast vertical space, a canyon of glass and light. Above him, on one of the high, suspended balconies reserved for the ruling clans, a figure stood watching the masses below. She was stunning, even by Sarathi standards. Her robes were woven from light-refracting silk that shimmered like oil on water. Her skin glowed with a soft, steady pulse of pale azure, marking her as high nobility. She leaned against the railing, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp, scanning the workers trudging through the lower levels. Jace paused, squinting up at her. He nudged Vix, who had just scuttled up beside him. "Look up there. Another glow princess watching the ant farm." Vix clicked his mandibles. "Careful. Jace, that is Lady Alira Sarath, heir to the house. She is not one to be mocked. They say she has a mind like a diamond drill." Jace watched her. Alira didn't look like she was drilling diamonds. She looked bored, or perhaps lonely. Then, as if she felt his gaze, she tilted her head. Her eyes locked onto him across the impossible distance. Jace didn't look away. He held his ground, a dirty mechanic staring down a princess. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, not of mockery, but of mild intrigue, before she turned and vanished back into the gilded halls of her ancestors. Jace shook his head. "Come on, Vix. I have a shift at the docking bay. The nobles want a show today." The show was the annual security trial. It was a piece of political theater designed to reassure the wealthy merchant families that the station was safe, while simultaneously stroking the egos of the elite Sarathi guard. The premise was simple. Release a few captured feral beasts into a containment field and watch the gallant guards neutralize them with elegant energy weapons. Jace's job was to stand in the shadows of Docking Bay 4 and make sure the hydraulic lifts didn't jam while the nobility streamed the event on their private feeds. The bay was cavernous, filled with crates of cargo awaiting transport. A massive energy barrier split the room in half. On one side, the arena floor was cleared. On the other, where Jace stood, dozens of civilian workers were cataloging supplies, oblivious to the violence about to be staged 100 yards away. Jace checked the pressure gauges on a hydraulic line, listening to the droning announcement over the PA system. "Behold the might of House Sarath." The announcer's voice boomed, smooth and melodious. "Safety is our promise. Order is our gift." The lights in the bay dimmed, focusing on the containment gate at the far end of the arena side. Above, in the VIP observation decks behind thick glass, the matriarchs and their daughters sipped nectar and watched the screens. Jace leaned against a stack of plasteel crates, arms crossed. He had seen real war. He had seen what happened when containment failed on a colony world. This sanitized violence made his stomach turn. "Release the specimen." The command came. The containment gate hissed open, but something was wrong. The sound wasn't the usual hydraulic whine. It was a grinding screech of metal shearing against metal. Jace straightened up. That doesn't sound right. On the arena floor, the beast emerged. It was not the standard training fauna, usually sluggish. Reptilian grazers painted to look scary. This thing was a nightmare. It stood on 6 legs, its body covered in heavy chitinous plating that shifted like tectonic plates as it moved. Bioluminescent scars pulsed angry red along its flanks. It had a head like a battering ram and a mouth full of needle teeth that dripped caustic saliva. A collective gasp went through the observation deck, audible even over the feeds. "This is a Class 5 siege beast," Jace whispered, his blood running cold. "Why the hell is that in a civilian station?" The Sarathi guards on the arena floor raised their elegant pikes, but they looked uncertain. They were ceremonial troops, used to stunning slow targets. This beast moved with the blurring speed of a predator. Then the lights flickered. A siren began to wail, but it was cut short by a burst of static. System malfunction. A mechanical voice droned, containment integrity compromised. Jace watched in horror as the energy barrier separating the arena from the cargo area, the area filled with unarmed workers, flickered and died. The beast roared, a sound that vibrated in the marrow of Jace's bones. It ignored the guards and turned toward the softer, easier prey. The civilians. "Run!" Jace screamed, his voice tearing through the stunned silence of the cargo bay. "Move!" The workers scattered, panic turning the organized dock into a stampede. But the blast doors, the safety exits meant to open in an emergency, slammed shut. The glitch was locking them in. The beast charged. It smashed through a row of metal crates as if they were made of paper, crushing a cargo hauler in its path. A Tellarite worker tripped, screaming as the monster loomed over him, raising a claw the size of a shovel. Jace didn't think. The rational part of his brain, the part that knew he was just a mechanic with a wrench, shut down. In its place, the old soldier woke up. He sprinted toward the beast. Flashbacks hit him like strobe lights. Mud, rain, the scream of artillery, a bunker on Orion 6. Don't let them through. Jace grabbed a heavy industrial tow cable hanging from a dormant crane. He hit the maglock activator and swung it with all his strength. The heavy magnetic clamp slammed into the beast's plated flank with a deafening clang. The monster roared, turning away from the cowering worker. It focused its 4 burning eyes on Jace. "Hey! Ugly!" Jace yelled, backing up, winding the cable around his forearm. "Over here!" The beast lunged. Jace dove to the right, feeling the wind of the creature's claws slice the air inches from his face. He rolled, coming up on one knee. He was unarmored. He had no gun. He had a wrench, a tow cable, and a lot of repressed anger. The beast snapped its jaws, taking a chunk out of a support pillar. Jace scrambled up a stack of crates, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He needed to get it to the airlock. It was the only way. He reached the top of the stack and jumped. It was a suicidal maneuver. He landed on the beast's back, grabbing onto the ridge of its armored spine. The creature bucked like a wild horse, thrashing to dislodge him. Jace held on, his fingers screaming in protest. He jammed his hydro spanner into a gap in the creature's neck plating. The beast shrieked, rearing up and slamming its back against the wall. Jace took the impact. He felt a rib crack, a sharp spike of fire in his side. His vision swam. "Get off," he gritted out, blood filling his mouth. He managed to loop the tow cable around the beast's throat and leaped off, letting the gravity of his fall pull the cable taut. He scrambled toward the maintenance console near the main airlock, dragging the thrashing monster with him. The beast clawed at the floor, gouging deep furrows in the deck plating, but Jace had the leverage. He slammed his fist onto the console. "Override! Open airlock 3! Access denied!" The computer chirped, safety lockout in effect. "Damn it!" Jace roared. He didn't have codes. He didn't have authorization. The beast had freed itself from the cable. It turned, eyes burning with intelligent, hateful malice. It crouched, ready to spring. There was no place left to run. Jace stood before the airlock door, his chest heaving, blood dripping from his nose onto his dirty flight suit. He looked at the manual release wheel. It was rusted, meant for 2 people to turn. Jace dropped the cable. He planted his feet. He wasn't going to die cowering. As the beast leaped, Jace didn't dodge. He stepped inside the arc of its claws, grabbing the creature's forelimbs. It was insane. It was physically impossible. Man against 2 tons of bioengineered muscle. But Jace pushed. He channeled every ounce of adrenaline. Every year of lifting heavy salvage, every nightmare he had survived, he roared, a primal sound that matched the beast's own cry. He shoved the creature backward, off balance. For a second, the beast faltered, shocked by the resistance. In that second, Jace spun and grabbed the manual wheel of the airlock. He hauled on it, veins bulging in his neck. The metal groaned. The seal broke with a hiss. The beast recovered and lunged, its jaws wide enough to swallow him whole. Jace kicked the release lever. The outer door blew. The atmosphere in the bay shrieked as it was sucked into the vacuum. The sudden pressure drop turned the air white. The beast, mid-leap, was caught in the gale. It clawed desperately at the floor, but the physics were undeniable. It was dragged, howling, into the cold dark of space. Jace hooked his arm through a safety ladder rung welded to the wall. The wind tore at him, trying to rip him loose. He felt his grip slipping. The cold was instant and biting. He stared into the void, watching the beast tumble away until it froze into a silent statue. With his last ounce of strength, Jace slammed the emergency seal button with his boot. The outer door groaned shut. The wind died. Silence returned to the bay, broken only by the hiss of repressurization and the sobbing of the survivors. Jace slumped to the floor. His hands were raw and bleeding. His rib felt like broken glass. He leaned his head back against the cold metal wall and closed his eyes. Far above, in the control chamber, the silence was absolute. The matriarchs sat frozen in their high-backed crystalline chairs. On the massive holographic display, the footage paused on a freeze frame. Jace, bloodied and snarling, holding back the claws of a nightmare with nothing but his bare hands. The High Matriarch, a woman of imposing stature and blinding white luminescence, leaned forward. Her expression was unreadable. To her right, a conservative clan leader whispered, "Horrifying, a brute." To her left, a reformist matriarch murmured, "Magnificent." But it was Lady Elira who broke the stillness. She stood near the back of the box, her hand pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide. She had watched the whole thing, the courage, the stupidity, the raw, undeniable power of it. She had seen him bleed to save people who meant nothing to the station's economy. She lowered her hand. Her pulse was hammering against her ribs. "Did you see his hands?" Elira whispered, though no one was listening to her. He did not use a weapon. He used his hands. The footage was already leaking. The Sarathi were a connected race, addicted to the flow of information. The feed from the docking bay had been accessed by a bored noble youth, then shared to a private group, then burst onto the public gossip streams. Within 10 minutes, the entire station had seen it. The caption that accompanied the video clip originated from a sensationalist gossip channel in the lower sectors, but it caught fire instantly. It was crude, provocative, and impossible to ignore. The human fought off a beast barehanded. Now alien matriarchs want to offer him daughters. Jace, lying on a stretcher as a medical drone knitted his rib back together, heard the phrase from a passing nurse. He let out a harsh, wheezing laugh that turned into a cough. "That is a good joke," he rasped. The nurse, a young Sarathi male, looked at him with wide, fearful eyes. "It is not a joke. Human. The networks are flooded. They are calling you the Iron-Handed One." Jace closed his eyes again. Great. Just what I needed. Fame. But in the high towers, the mood was far from humorous. The council had convened an emergency session. The air in the chamber crackled with psychic tension. "This was an accident," insisted Matriarch Vora, the head of the security caste. "A system failure." "A failure that released a siege beast?" countered Matriarch Elara. "That creature has not been seen since the border wars." "Where did it come from?" "In the shadows of the room, standing behind the throne of the High Matriarch. A group of figures in heavy, hooded robes exchanged glances. They were the priest matriarchs, the keepers of the old ways. They did not speak, but their silence was heavy. They knew exactly where the beast had come from, and they knew that the human surviving it was a complication they had not anticipated. The High Matriarch raised a hand, silencing the room. The human. Jace, he is an employee of the station. He is a debtor, Vora spat, a salvage rat. He is a symbol, Elara corrected. Look at the feeds. The lower castes are celebrating him. If we punish him for destroying station property, we risk a riot. If we ignore him, we look weak. Then we must embrace him, the High Matriarch said slowly. We must make his victory our own. The order went out. Jace was just sitting up, testing his mended rib, when the door to the infirmary slid open. 4 members of the elite guard marched in. They wore ceremonial armor that gleamed like polished pearl, and their energy pikes hummed with lethal power. Jace sighed. Am I under arrest? You are summoned, the lead guard said. Jace was hauled up. He wasn't given time to shower, only to wipe the worst of the dried blood from his face and hands. They brought him to a preparation room just off the Great Hall. Attendants, silent, swift Sarathi servants descended on him. They stripped off his torn flight suit and draped him in a heavy velvet cloak of deep midnight blue, pinned with a silver clasp. It was absurd. He was wearing noble robes over grease-stained underwear and combat boots. He looked at himself in the polished mirror of the preparation room. He looked like a barbarian trying to play king. His face was bruised, his knuckles swollen and scabbed. Why are they doing this? Jace asked his reflection. A voice crackled in his earpiece, cold and imperious. Protocol requires you to be presentable. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not look the High Matriarch in the eye. The heavy double doors began to groan open. Beyond them lay the council hall, a cathedral of living crystal and drifting light forms. Jace could feel the weight of 100 gazes pressing against him. Kneel, the voice in his ear commanded. Jace stood there for a moment. He looked at his hands, the hands that had held back a monster. He looked at the open doors. He took a deep breath, straightened his spine, and walked forward. But he did not kneel. The great doors of the council hall parted with a sound like a massive lung inhaling, revealing a cavernous space that seemed less like a room and more like the inside of a geode. The walls were not built. They were grown, towering spires of living crystal that pulsed with a slow, rhythmic bioluminescence. Drifting light forms, semi-sentient jellyfish of pure energy, floated near the vaulted ceiling, casting shifting shadows over the tiers of seating where the matriarch sat. Jace walked down the central aisle, the borrowed velvet cloak heavy on his shoulders. He felt ridiculous. He felt like a child playing dress-up in a graveyard. His combat boots, scuffed and stained with hydraulic fluid, clacked loudly against the polished obsidian floor, a jarring, ugly rhythm in this place of silent grace. Keep walking, he told himself. Don't look at them. Don't look like prey. But it was hard not to feel like a specimen in a jar. Hundreds of eyes watched him. The matriarchs sat on elevated daises, arranged by the antiquity of their bloodlines. They were tall, terrifyingly elegant, their skin glowing in hues of violet, indigo, and pale gold. They whispered to one another as he passed, a sound like dry leaves skittering over stone. Look at the brute, Jace imagined them saying. Look at the dirt under his fingernails. Look at the way he walks, all heavy gravity and bad attitude. He reached the center of the chamber, where a circle of light marked the spot for petitioners and the condemned. He stopped, resisting the urge to cross his arms, a defensive gesture that would look weak, and instead let his hands hang loose at his sides. the hands that had strangled a siege beast. They still throbbed under the bandages. "Kneel." The voice in his ear buzzed again. Jace gritted his teeth. He bent one knee, lowering himself slowly, not in submission, but with the stiff, deliberate movement of a man whose ribs were taped together. "Rise, Jace of Earth," a voice boomed from the highest dais. It was the High Matriarch. She was a figure of blinding white light, her features obscured by the sheer intensity of her own bioluminescence. She did not speak with a microphone. The acoustics of the crystal hall amplified her voice until it vibrated in Jace's chest. "You stand before the Council of Mothers," the High Matriarch intoned. "Yesterday, violence marred our sacred trial. A beast, born of accident and error, threatened the lives of our subjects. In that moment of chaos where our own systems failed, a stranger stepped forward and she paused, letting the silence stretch. With empty hands, he met the fury of the wild. With iron will, he turned death aside. We do not look at his species, nor his station. We look at his spirit, and the council finds it worthy." A ripple of polite applause moved through the hall. It sounded like rain on a tin roof. "Therefore," the High Matriarch continued, raising her arms, "we declare that this human is no longer merely a debtor. He is a ward of the houses, and as a gesture of our supreme gratitude, to honor the vitality he has displayed, we open the rites of alliance. The noble houses are hereby permitted, nay, encouraged, to offer their daughters to court him." Jace blinked. He looked up, forgetting the protocol about eye contact. "Excuse me?" he said. His voice was small in the vast hall, but it cut through the ceremony like a knife. The High Matriarch ignored him. Let it be known that the bloodlines of Serath, Kale, and Valis see potential in this union. Let the daughters come forward. Jace stood up, his knee popping audibly. "Wait a minute," he said, louder this time. "I did not ask for a reward, and I definitely did not ask to be. Honor is not asked for. Human." The High Matriarch's voice dropped an octave, freezing him in place. "It is bestowed. To refuse the gratitude of the council is to declare yourself an enemy of the peace. Is that your wish? To return to the crushing debt? To be cast out of the airlock you so bravely opened?" The threat was velvet-wrapped but unmistakable. Play along. Or die. Jace clenched his jaw so hard his teeth ached. He was trapped. They were not offering him a wife. They were offering to breed him like a prize stallion. And if he said no, they would put him down. "Then let the presentation begin," the High Matriarch commanded. From the shadows to the right of the dais, a figure stepped forward. She moved with a fluidity that made the air seem thick, like she was swimming rather than walking. Her robes were a deep, shimmering teal, cut to reveal the glowing patterns that traced the line of her throat and collarbones. She was tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, looking down at Jace with eyes the color of a stormy sea. "This is Lady Elira, heir to House Serath," the announcer declared. Elira stopped 3 paces from him. Up close, she was breathtaking, terrifyingly so. Her face was sharp, angular, and regal, but there was a tightness around her mouth that suggested she was enjoying this about as much as he was. She looked him up and down, her gaze clinical, stripping away the velvet cloak and seeing the soldier underneath. "Greetings, Ward Jace," she said. Her voice was cool, clear water over jagged rocks. "My mother, the High Matriarch, speaks highly of your durability." Jace met her eyes. She was the woman from the balcony, the one who had looked at him like he was an interesting puzzle. "Lady," Jace said, his voice flat, "I am just a mechanic who had a bad day. You do not want this." Alira's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of genuine curiosity breaking through her mask. It is not about what we want, is it? It is about what is required. She performed a formal bow, not deep enough to be submissive, just barely polite enough to avoid insult. As she straightened, she murmured, low enough that only he could hear. Try not to look so terrified. It makes you look like prey. Before Jace could retort, she stepped back, and the circus continued. Lady Vora of House Kale, a woman with skin that glowed a fiery orange, stormed forward. She was broader than Alira, muscular and grinning with sharp teeth. She circled Jace like a shark inspecting a piece of meat. Impressive shoulders for a mammal, she announced to the room, slapping Jace on the arm hard enough to sting. I bet you scream loud when you fight. I like that. Next came Lady Zal. She was thin, almost skeletal, with large black eyes and skin that pulsed with a faint, sickly green light. She carried a data pad and did not look at Jace's face, but at his body. Fascinating. She giggled, tapping on her screen. The asymmetry of the human musculature and the external reproductive organs so vulnerable. How have you not been extinct for millennia? Jace looked at Alira, who was standing off to the side. She raised a single, perfect eyebrow. A silent communication of, welcome to my world. The ritual dragged on for an hour. By the end, Jace felt less like a hero and more like a side of beef at an auction, when they finally dismissed him, sending him away with an honor guard. He felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with his broken rib, high above, in the private chambers of House Serath. Alira stood before her mother. The High Matriarch had dimmed her luminescence, looking now like a weary, powerful woman rather than a goddess. You saw him? The High Matriarch asked, pouring a glass of nectar. I saw him, Alira replied. He is rough, unpolished. He hates us. Good, the Matriarch said. Hate is honest. Ambition is what you must watch for. The Matriarch turned, her eyes hard. The other houses see a breeding stock. I see a weapon. The prophecy has unsettled the lower castes. If we control the human, we control the narrative. You will court him. Alira, you will charm him. You will find out what drives him, greed, lust, fear, and you will bind him to House Serath. And if he refuses to be bound, Alira asked, her voice tight. Then you will find his weakness, the Matriarch said coldly, and you will use it. We cannot afford a loose cannon on the deck, daughter, not with the whispers growing in the dark. Alira looked down at her hands. She had been raised to play this game. She knew how to manipulate, how to lie, how to trade smiles for secrets. But she remembered the footage of the man standing alone against the beast. He had saved people who were nothing to him. I will handle him, Alira said, but she felt a cold knot in her stomach. They put Jace in the spire of guests. It was a gilded cage. The floors were covered in soft moss-like carpets, and the walls were transparent aluminum offering a view of the galaxy that could make you weep. But the door was locked, and 2 guards stood outside. Jace was sitting on the edge of a bed large enough to sleep a squad, trying to figure out how to work the food synthesizer, when the door chimed. Enter. He grunted. Alira swept in. She had changed out of her ceremonial robes into something simpler, a tunic and trousers of woven silver thread. She carried a small data pad. You are struggling with the hydration unit, she observed, watching him bang the side of the machine. It keeps giving me hot jazzberry juice, Jace said. I just want water. Cold water. Alira tapped the console with a long, glowing finger. The machine whirred and dispensed a glass of clear, ice-cold liquid. You have to ask it politely, she said. a dry smile touching her lips. I am not good at polite. Jace took the glass and downed it in one go. So, what is this? The courtship? Are you here to measure my skull? Cultural orientation, Alira said, sitting on a floating chair opposite him. If you are going to be paraded through high society, you need to not embarrass us. You walk like a hauler, you speak like a grunt, and you have the diplomatic instincts of an asteroid. I am a grunt, Jace said, leaning back, and I am not interested in your high society. I want to go back to my bunk and finish paying off my contract. Your contract is frozen, Alira said. You are a ward now. You have no debt, but you also have no freedom. Not really. She looked at him, her expression shifting from haughty to something sharper. Listen to me. Jace, the Matriarchs are playing a game. You are the ball. If you do not learn the rules, you will be kicked around until you break. Jace looked at her. He saw the intelligence in her eyes, the steel behind the shimmer. Teach me, then. Alira stood up. Stand up. Let us start with greetings. When you met the council, you looked like you were preparing for a wrestling match. I was, Jace muttered, standing. Sarathi do not shake hands, Alira explained, stepping into his personal space. We do not grab. We acknowledge the life force. She reached out. Jace flinched, instinctively tense. Easy, soldier, she murmured. She raised her hands, slowly, deliberately. She placed her fingertips against the side of his neck, right over his pulse point. Then she took his wrists, placing her thumbs over the veins there. Jace froze. Her skin was cool at first, like polished stone. But then a sudden, startling warmth flooded from her fingertips into his skin. It wasn't just body heat. It felt like a low-voltage current. A hum of energy that bypassed his nerves and hit his chest. You feel that? Alira whispered. Her face was inches from his. He could smell her scent, ozone and rain. I feel it, Jace said, his voice rougher than he intended. This is how we say, I see your life, I hold it, and I do not harm it. She was looking up at him, her eyes wide. She could feel his pulse hammering against her fingertips. It was fast, erratic. Your heart is racing, she noted. You are standing very close, Jace replied. Alira felt her own breath catch. She was supposed to be analyzing him, finding his levers. But standing here, feeling the raw, thumping vitality of a human life under her hands, she felt unmoored. He was solid, warm, real. She pulled her hands back abruptly, stepping away. That is sufficient for today, she said, smoothing her tunic. She turned away, needing to put distance between them. Now, the offers. She picked up her datapad, her composure returning like a shield. Since the announcement, 12 minor houses have submitted formal applications for your genetic material. She scrolled through the list, her tone dripping with sarcasm. House Flex offers 3,000 credits and a guaranteed seat on their trade council in exchange for, and I quote, a sample of the biological vigor displayed in the arena. Jace groaned, burying his face in his hands. Please stop. House Quarn has sent a detailed diagram of how they would like to modify your ears to be more aesthetically pleasing for the wedding photos. Alira continued, a smirk playing on her lips. And Lady Cora wants to know if your aggression is hereditary or trained, as she requires a consort who can guard her pet lizard hounds. I am a walking stud service, Jace said, sounding defeated. Alira looked at him. The humor faded from her face. Yes, you are. The silence stretched between them. It is disgusting, isn't it? Jace asked quietly. Yes, Alira admitted. It is. But it is the way of things. We trade blood like currency. You are just new currency. She looked at him, really looked at him. But you are not currency to yourself, are you? No, Jace said. I am just a guy who wants to fix ships. Illyra nodded slowly. Then we will have to make them see that. Or at least, make them think they see what they want. So they leave you alone. 2 days later, the grand banquet was held in the Hall of Moons. If the council hall was a cathedral, this was a fever dream of excess. The gravity in the center of the room had been lowered, allowing dancers to spin in three-dimensional patterns, their trailing silks creating woven tapestries in the air. The tables groaned under piles of glowing fruit, roasted meats from 3 different sectors, and fountains of spiced wine. Jay stood by a pillar, wearing a formal tunic that Illyra had picked out. It was dark gray, simple, cutting a sharp contrast to the peacock-bright robes of the nobility. "Stay close," Illyra murmured, standing beside him. Her hand hovered near his elbow, not touching but close enough to guide him. "Do not eat the blue fruit. It is mild hallucinations. And do not stare at Matriarch Zal's third eye, she is sensitive about it. I am just trying not to trip." Jace muttered. The room was filled with the elite. They watched Jace as he moved, whispering behind jeweled fans. He could feel the mixture of desire and fear in the air. To them, he was a dangerous animal that had been let into the parlor, exciting, but terrifying. Matriarch Vora of the security caste approached, a goblet of wine in her hand. "The hero," she purred. "You clean up well, human. Though I preferred you covered in beast blood, it was more authentic. I will try to arrange a massacre for your next party," Jace said dryly. Illyra stepped in smoothly. "Lady Vora always appreciates a kinetic display, but we are hoping for a quiet evening." Vora laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "Quiet, with the prophecy on everyone's lips? You are optimistic." "Illyra." She drifted away, leaving a chill in the air. Jace scanned the room. It was an old habit. Check the exits, check the sight lines, watch the hands. "Relax," Illyra whispered. "You are vibrating." "Something is wrong," Jace said. "You are paranoid. It is a party." "No." Jace's eyes narrowed. "Look at the security drones, the ones by the upper vents." Illyra looked up. The floating spherical drones were drifting in a standard patrol pattern. "They look normal." "They are out of sync," Jace said. "That one on the left, it is lagging by half a second. And the heat signature, it is running hot." Before Illyra could answer, Jace's gaze snapped to the High Matriarch's dais at the far end of the hall. Her mother was sitting on a throne of woven gold, laughing with a diplomat. Behind the throne, the air shimmered. It was faint, just a distortion of light, like heat rising from pavement. "Get down!" Jace roared. He didn't wait for permission. He sprinted across the hall. The low gravity caught him, launching him in a long, gliding leap that carried him over the heads of the startled dancers. "Security!" Illyra screamed, reacting instantly to his panic. Jace landed on the dais, sliding across the polished floor. The shimmer behind the throne solidified into a figure cloaked in black, wearing a mask that looked like a skull. The assassin raised a device, a tube of organic metal. With a soft thwip, a projectile launched toward the High Matriarch's neck. Jace didn't have time to tackle the assassin. He tackled the Matriarch. He slammed into her, knocking the glowing ruler of the sector out of her throne and onto the floor. The projectile, a small, writhing beetle with razor wings, whizzed through the space where her throat had been and embedded itself in the golden backrest of the throne. It exploded in a hiss of acid, melting the metal instantly. If that had hit her, the hall erupted, screams, shattering glass, The barrier fields around the exit slammed up, trapping everyone inside. "Assassin!" Jace yelled, rolling to his feet. The cloaked figure drew a vibroblade, the hum of the weapon vicious and high-pitched. Jace grabbed a heavy serving platter from the overturned table. It was silver, heavy, and better than nothing. The assassin lunged. Jace parried the blade with the platter, the metal shrieking as it was sliced. He kicked out, aiming for the assassin's knee, but the figure moved with supernatural speed, flowing like smoke. More shimmers appeared in the hall. 3 more assassins decloaked near the crowd. Illyra was there. She didn't run. She raised her arms, and the bioluminescence on her skin flared blindingly bright. From the sleeves of her dress, she drew 2 retractable whips made of cohesive plasma. "Back!" she shouted, snapping the whips. The lashes of fire cracked through the air, forcing 2 of the assassins back. Jace was busy trying not to get filleted. The assassin on the dais was skilled, pressing him hard. Jace used the environment. He threw a goblet of wine into the assassin's face, blinding him for a split second, then swung the edge of the serving platter into the attacker's throat. The assassin gagged and stumbled back. Jace followed up with a brutal right hook, putting his hip into it. The mask cracked. The figure went down. Jace spun around, scanning for the High Matriarch. She was on the floor, shaken but alive, her guards finally swarming around her. "Check the others," Jace shouted to Illyra. Illyra was a whirlwind of teal light and plasma fire. She moved with a dancer's grace, her whips keeping the attackers at bay while the station security finally breached the room. The assassins, realizing the element of surprise was lost, touched devices on their belts. In unison, they disintegrated into piles of gray ash. Suicide protocols. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sobbing of a terrified noble and the hum of Illyra's weapons powering down. Jace stood on the dais, chest heaving, holding a dented serving platter. Illyra stood in the center of the room, glowing with adrenaline. Their eyes met across the devastation. There was no mockery now, no political games, just the raw, breathless recognition of 2 soldiers who had survived the fire together. Illyra looked at him, bruised, disheveled, standing over her mother with a piece of tableware. And she didn't see a pet. She saw a partner. The lockdown was immediate and brutal. The station was sealed. Security patrols swept every corridor. Rumors flew faster than light. It was a human plot. No, Jace saved her. It was the Kale family. It was a coup. In the chaos, Illyra was summoned to her mother's private sanctum. The room was dim, lit only by a few floating candles. The High Matriarch sat in a chair, looking old. Her neck was bruised where Jace had tackled her. "You are hurt," Illyra said, rushing to her side. "I am alive," the matriarch rasped. "Because of him." She looked at Illyra. The assassins. One of them wore the signet of the deep priesthood under his cloak. I saw it before he turned to ash. Illyra went cold. The priesthood. But they are the keepers of the law. They are the keepers of the past, the matriarch corrected. And they fear the future. They fear what the human represents. Change. She grabbed Illyra's hand. Her grip was iron hard. "Listen to me. Illyra, this was not a random act. The beast, the assassination, it is a web, and we are caught in it." "What do I do?" Illyra whispered. "Keep him close," the matriarch ordered. "The human, Jace, he sees things we miss. He has instincts we have bred out of ourselves. You must work with him. But, Mother, no objections." The matriarch's eyes flashed. "Trust no one else, not the council, not your sisters. Find out who is pulling the strings before they tear this station apart." Illyra nodded slowly. She thought of Jace's heartbeat under her fingers. She thought of him standing on the dais, defending a woman who looked at him like a bug. "I will keep him close," Illyra promised. And for the first time, it wasn't a political maneuver. It was a necessity, and perhaps a desire. The door to Jace's quarters slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss, revealing Lady Illyra standing in the corridor. She was not wearing the shimmering, ethereal robes of court, but a sleek, dark bodysuit made of a matte fabric that seemed to absorb the light. A data satchel hung at her hip, and her usually elaborate hair was pulled back into a severe, practical knot. "Security reassessment," Illyra said, stepping inside before Jace could invite her. Her voice was clipped, businesslike. "I require your input on the structural vulnerabilities of the noble sector." Jace was sitting on the floor dismantling a malfunctioning cleaning drone he had fished out of the waste disposal unit. He looked up, a grease-stained screwdriver in his hand. "Security reassessment," Jace repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Is that what we are calling it? Because from where I am sitting, it looks like you are dressed for a burglary." Illyra let the door seal behind her. She tapped a device on her wrist, and a low hum filled the room, a privacy scrambler. "The walls have ears." "Jace," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And the floors have sensors, and the ceiling probably has a camera disguised as a light fixture. I am not here for security. I am here because I need your eyes." Jace set the screwdriver down. "My eyes? You have 1,000 cameras on this station. I have 1,000 cameras that show me what the council wants me to see," Illyra replied, pacing the room. The beast in the docking bay was not an accident. The assassin at the banquet was not a lone fanatic. Someone let them in. Someone with codes high enough to bypass the grid. She stopped and looked at him. "You saw the anomalies in the drones before the attack. You realized the beast was being herded, not just contained. You see the cracks in the machine. I need that." "And what do I get?" Jace asked, standing up and wiping his hands on a rag. "Besides the thrill of being executed for treason if we get caught." "You get the truth," Illyra said. "And if we survive, you get a way out of this cage." Jace studied her. She looked tired. The bioluminescence of her skin was dim, a sign of stress he was beginning to recognize. But beneath the exhaustion, there was steel. She was scared, but she was moving forward anyway. He respected that. "Fine," Jace said. "Where do we start?" They started with the boring part, which was usually where the truth was hidden. Sitting side by side at the room's holographic terminal, they combed through terabytes of maintenance logs and security feeds. It was tedious work, but Jace fell into a rhythm. He pointed out timestamps that didn't match, power surges that had been labeled as routine cycling but coincided with security blackouts. Illyra, in turn, navigated the labyrinth of Sarathi bureaucracy. She knew which codes belonged to which house, which subroutines were automatic, and which required living authorization. "Here," Jace said, pointing to a string of data. 2 hours before the beast was released, the proximity sensors in Bay 4 were disabled. The log says it was for calibration, but the authorization code is encrypted. Illyra frowned, her fingers dancing over the interface. She isolated the encryption key. It is a dual-layered seal. The outer layer is standard maintenance. But the inner layer? She paled slightly. That is a liturgical algorithm. It belongs to the priest matriarchs. "The ones in the hoods," Jace said. "The ones who stand in the back and look spooky." "The keepers of the faith," Illyra corrected, though her tone was grim. "They have override authority over almost everything, technically for spiritual emergencies." Disabling sensors is not spiritual. They tracked the command source. It didn't come from the temples. It originated from a node in the lower sectors, the underbelly. Sector 88, Jace said. That is the waste processing and reclamation zone. It is dark. It smells like sulfur. And the only people who go there are people who do not want to be found. Then that is where we go, Illyra said, standing up. The underbelly was a different world from the crystal spires above. Here, the station was raw metal and dripping condensation. The air was thick with the smell of ozone, recycled air, and unwashed bodies. The lighting was harsh, flickering fluorescence that buzzed like angry insects. Jace and Illyra moved through the crowded corridors. Illyra wore a heavy cloak with the hood pulled low to hide her glowing skin, but she still drew looks. She moved too gracefully for this place. Jace walked with his shoulders hunched, blending in with the tired shift workers and scavengers. They found the contact Jace had dug up from an old salvage manifest, a man named Kalen. He lived in a repurposed shipping container stacked precariously atop 3 others. Kalen was Sarathi, but barely. His light had faded to a dull, sickly gray, and one of his arms had been replaced with a crude mechanical prosthetic. He had been a beast handler for the arenas before being disgraced and exiled to the depths. He sat in the shadows of his container, nursing a bottle of something that smelled like rocket fuel. You are asking dangerous questions, Kalen rasped, looking from Jace to the hooded figure of Illyra. The beast in the docking bay? That was no training animal. That was a chimera. A chimera? Illyra asked, stepping forward. Kalen laughed, a wet, rattling sound. You think the beasts are aliens? You think we just find them on jungle moons and bring them here? Look at their eyes. Girl, look at the bone structure. He leaned forward, his mechanical hand whirring. The Sarathi genome is unstable. It has always been. We drift toward light and energy, but the flesh remembers the mud. Thousands of years ago, before the houses were refined, we were predators. Jace felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp air. What are you saying? I am saying the beasts are us, Kalen whispered. They are the shadow line, the genetic runoff. When a bloodline gets too pure, too inbred, sometimes it breaks. The result is a monster. The matriarchs keep them. They say it is to study them, to cure the flaw. But really, they keep them because they are family. Illyra recoiled as if slapped. That is a lie. That is heresy. Is it? Kalen sneered. That thing the human fought? I saw the footage. It moved like a dancer. It fought like a soldier. It had the rage of a sentient being that knows it has been caged. Why do you think the priest matriarchs guard the lab so closely? They are hiding the family shame. A heavy boom shook the container. Kalen's eyes went wide. They are here. Jace didn't ask who. He grabbed Illyra's arm. Move! The front of the shipping container exploded inward. Jace and Illyra were thrown back by the concussion. Smoke and sparks filled the small space. Figures in tactical armor, no insignias, faces obscured by opaque visors, swarmed through the breach. Target the human, one of them shouted. Secure the air! They weren't assassins this time. They were abductors. Jace scrambled up, coughing. He grabbed a heavy pry bar from Kalen's workbench. A trooper lunged at him with a shock baton. Jace ducked, the baton crackling over his head, and swung the pry bar into the trooper's knee. The armor crunched, and the man went down screaming. Illyra had lost her cloak. Her luminescence flared in the dark room, turning her into a beacon. 2 troopers rushed her, trying to pin her arms. She didn't need Jace to save her. She spun, using the momentum of the first attacker to throw him into the wall. She drove her palm into the second man's chest, discharging a kinetic pulse that sent him flying backward into a stack of crates. "Corridor!" Jace yelled. They bolted out of the container into the narrow alleyway of the sector. More troopers were dropping from the gantries above. There were too many of them. "Left!" Illyra shouted. They turned a corner into a dead-end service tunnel. "Damn it!" Jace swore. "Wait!" Illyra pointed up. There was a maintenance hatch in the ceiling about 10 feet up. Jace laced his fingers together. "Go!" Illyra didn't hesitate. She ran at him, stepped into his hands, and he launched her upward. She caught the rim of the hatch, hauled herself up, and then reached down. Jace jumped, grabbing her hand. She groaned with the effort but pulled him up. He scrambled through the opening just as a laser blast scorched the metal where his head had been. They slammed the hatch shut and engaged the manual lock. They were in a ventilation shaft. It was dark, cramped, and smelled of stale air and grease. It was barely wide enough for one person, let alone two. They crawled in silence for 10 minutes, putting distance between them and the ambush, until they reached a junction where the shaft widened slightly. They collapsed against the metal walls, gasping for breath. Jace checked himself. He had a gash on his forehead and his shoulder was throbbing where he had hit the wall. Illyra looked worse. Her bodysuit was torn at the sleeve, and there was a dark bruise forming on her cheek. "You are bleeding," Illyra said, reaching out to touch his forehead. "So are you," Jace said. She winced as she touched her own face. "They were trying to take us alive." "Yeah," Jace said, ripping a strip of cloth from his shirt to wipe the blood from his eyes. "Dead heroes are useful symbols. Live captives are leverage." Illyra watched him. In the dim light of the shaft, the glow of her skin was the only illumination. It cast deep shadows on Jace's face, highlighting the scars, the harsh lines of his jaw. "Hold still," she murmured. She leaned forward, peeling back the torn fabric of his sleeve to inspect a burn from a near-miss laser shot. Her fingers were cool and steady. She pulled a small med patch from her belt. She had come prepared and applied it to his skin. Jace flinched. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "No," Jace said. "It stings. You fought a siege beast bare-handed. But you flinch at antiseptic?" Illyra teased gently. "The beast did not have cold hands," Jace muttered. He looked at her. She was close. Very close. The shaft was so narrow that their legs were tangled together. He could feel the heat radiating from her. "Let me see that bruise," Jace said. He reached out. Illyra went still. He touched her cheek, his thumb brushing the darkening skin. His hand was rough, calloused, stained with the grime of the underbelly. Against her perfect, glowing skin, it looked like a stone resting on a jewel. Illyra leaned into his touch, just a fraction. Her eyes searched his. "I was terrified," Jace whispered. The words came out before he could stop them. "In the arena?" Illyra asked softly. "Yes. And back there in the container. I am not. I am not the Iron Man your mother talks about. I am just a guy who runs fast and hits things because he is scared of dying." Illyra's hand came up to cover his hand on her cheek. "I hate it," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I hate being the heir. I hate the games. I hate that my mother looks at me and sees a treaty, not a daughter. When they offered you to me, I felt sick, not because of you, but because it was just another transaction." Jace's thumb stroked her cheekbone. "I know." The air in the shaft seemed to get heavier, charged with something that wasn't just adrenaline. They were two people who had been stripped of their roles. No matriarchs, no debts, no politics, just flesh and blood in the dark. Illyra's gaze dropped to his lips, then back to his eyes. Her breathing hitched. Jace felt his own heart hammering against his ribs, a traitorous rhythm. He leaned in. She met him halfway. Their faces were inches apart. He could smell the ozone scent of her skin, mixed now with dust and sweat. It was the most real thing he had ever smelled. A heavy clanking sound echoed through the metal walls. Footsteps on the grating above them. A patrol. They froze, pressed together, holding their breath. Illyra buried her face in Jace's neck to hide her glow. Jace wrapped his arms around her, shielding her with his body, his hand pressed against the back of her head. They stayed like that for what felt like an hour, though it was probably only minutes. Chest to chest, heartbeat to heartbeat. Jace could feel the soft curves of her body against his hard angles. He could feel the rapid flutter of her pulse. The footsteps faded. They pulled back slowly, the loss of contact leaving a physical ache. "That was close," Jace whispered, his voice hoarse. "Too close." Illyra agreed. She looked flustered, her luminescence pulsing in an erratic, pinkish rhythm. Jace cleared his throat, trying to break the tension. "You know, for a superior species, your ventilation shafts are terrible. Human vents have much more legroom and fewer spiders." Illyra laughed, a shaky, breathless sound. She wiped a smudge of dirt from her nose. "And your heartbeat. It sounded like a startled prey animal. I thought the guards would hear it through the floor." Jace grinned crookedly. That was not fear. Princess. That was allergic reaction to dust. They laughed, quietly, in the dark. It was a relief. A release valve for the terror and the desire that was threatening to drown them both. They followed the ventilation system upward, bypassing the security checkpoints, until they reached the sector beneath the High Council chambers. This was the domain of the priest Matriarchs. The air here was cold and smelled of incense and old paper. They dropped down into a restricted archive room. It was a mausoleum of data, rows of crystalline memory cores stretching into the darkness. "This is it," Illyra whispered. "The historical vault. If there is proof of the shadow line, it is here." They accessed a terminal. Illyra used a code she had stolen from her mother's private study years ago. A rebellious act she had never thought she would use. The files opened. It was worse than Kaelin had said. The records went back 500 years. Project Chimera, Project Dominion, the purification protocols. They watched videos of early experiments, Sarathi volunteers and later prisoners being injected with mutagenic compounds derived from the feral fauna of Deathworlds. The goal was to create a caste of super soldiers, loyal only to the blood, capable of violence that the refined nobility could not stomach. The subjects twisted, their minds broke, they became the beasts. And then, the revival, a log dated 3 months ago. Subject 7 Alpha. Transport to Station Iocanthus approved for field testing. The authorization signature was at the bottom of the document. It was a genetic seal, a complex swirling pattern of DNA data that could not be forged. Jace recognized the name associated with it, even in the alien script, because he had seen it on every decree for the last week. Illyra made a sound like a wounded animal. "No," she whispered. "No." She stared at the screen. The seal belonged to the High Matriarch, her mother. Illyra backed away, shaking her head. "It is a lie. It has to be a forgery. The priests faked it." Jace looked at the data, the timestamp, the encryption, the biometric metadata embedded in the file. It was solid. "Illyra," Jace said gently. "The encryption is verified. It is her seal." She spun on him. her eyes blazing with sudden, irrational fury. "You want it to be her. You want us to be monsters." "I want the truth," Jace snapped back. "Look at the date. She authorized the transport. She knew the beast was here. Maybe she didn't order the release, but she brought the weapon to the station." "She is my mother," Alira shouted, her voice cracking. "She stands for order. She would not risk the station." "She is a politician," Jace yelled, "and politicians sacrifice pawns. That is all I was in that bay. That is all those workers were, acceptable losses for a demonstration of power." Alira slapped him. It was not a playful tap. It was a hard, stinging blow across the face. Jace stood there, head turned to the side, taking it. "You are just a symbol," Alira hissed, tears streaming down her glowing face. "That is all you are to her, a convenient hero to distract the masses while she cleans up her mess. And you are letting her do it. You are playing the part perfectly." "And what are you doing?" Jace asked, his voice low and dangerous. "You are standing here defending the person who put a monster in a room with innocent people. You are the heir. Does that mean you inherit the lies too?" Alira stared at him, her chest heaving, the silence stretched, brittle and sharp as glass. Then she crumbled. The anger drained out of her, leaving only devastation. She sank to the floor, wrapping her arms around herself, rocking slightly. "I do not know who I am anymore," she whispered. They couldn't go back to Jace's quarters, it was too exposed. They couldn't go to Alira's apartments. She led them to a safe room she maintained in the lower noble ring, a small, windowless panic room stocked with supplies. The room was stark white and silent. Alira sat on the narrow cot, staring at the wall. Jace paced the small floor space. "I am sorry I hit you," Alira said, her voice hollow. "I have had worse," Jace said. He sat down next to her, leaving a respectful distance. "She is the only family I have," Alira said. "My sister died years ago. My father was a consort who was sent away when I was born. She taught me everything. How to walk, how to speak, how to rule. If she is a monster, then what am I?" "You are the one who broke into the archives to find the truth," Jace said. "You are the one who fought beside me in the banquet hall. You are not her." Alira turned to look at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her luminescence dim and wavering. She looked incredibly young and incredibly breakable. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were trembling. "I am terrified, Jace," she whispered. "I am terrified of the council. I am terrified of the prophecy. But mostly, I am terrified that I am just another piece of the machinery, that I am incapable of anything real." "You are real," Jace said. She moved closer. The heat of her body was a physical weight against his side. She gripped his hand tighter, digging her nails into his skin as if he were the only solid thing in a dissolving world. "Make me feel real," she breathed. She kissed him. It wasn't like the moment in the shaft. That had been tentative, accidental. This was desperate. It was a collision. Her lips were hot, tasting of salt and electric ozone. She pressed against him, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him down. Jace responded instinctively. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. The kiss deepened, becoming hungry, messy, full of the anger and fear they had been carrying all day. They fell back onto the cot, limbs tangling. Alira's hands were everywhere, pulling at his shirt, her touch searing his skin. For a moment, Jace let himself go. He let himself want her. She was fire and light and softness, and he was starving for it. But then he felt the desperation in her. He felt the way she was using him to blot out the pain, to escape the reality of her mother's betrayal. She wasn't choosing him. She was drowning. And he was the driftwood. Jace pulled back. Illyra made a sound of protest and tried to pull him back down, but he caught her wrists. "Stop," Jace gasped, his forehead resting against hers. "Stop? Why?" Illyra whispered, her eyes searching his, frantic. "Do you not want me?" "God, yes," Jace said, his voice ragged. "I want you, but not like this." He sat up, pulling her up with him. He held her hands between his, looking her dead in the eye. "You are hurting, Illyra. You are spinning out. If we do this now, tonight, you will hate yourself in the morning. You will feel like you lost control. And I will not be another thing that happened to you. I will not be another obligation or a mistake." Illyra stared at him, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The frantic energy began to ebb, replaced by a slow, dawning realization. He was giving her a choice. In a life where everything had been decided for her, her title, her duties, her marriage, he was stopping. "I want to choose," she whispered. "Then choose," Jace said softly. "But do it when you are not bleeding and terrified." Illyra let out a long, shuddering breath. She leaned her forehead against his shoulder. "Thank you," she murmured. They didn't leave the room. They couldn't. It was the only safe place left. They lay down on the narrow cot, fully clothed, side by side. There was barely enough room. Jace lay on his back, staring at the ceiling. Illyra lay on her side, facing him, her hand resting lightly on his chest, right over his heart. They didn't touch other than that. But the air between them was humming. "Jace?" Illyra said into the darkness. "Yeah? What do we do tomorrow?" "We survive," Jace said. "And then we figure out how to burn the corruption out without burning down the station?" Illyra was silent for a long time. Then, just as Jace thought she had fallen asleep, she spoke again. "You were right," she whispered, "about the vents. Ours are terrible." Jace smiled in the dark. "Go to sleep, Illyra." He felt her relax against him, her breathing slowing down. But Jace stayed awake, watching the shadows, feeling the weight of the woman beside him and the weight of the target painted on his back. The game had changed. They weren't just investigating a crime anymore. They were declaring war on the woman who ruled the world. The High Matriarch's private sanctum was a place of suffocating silence. The walls were not crystal here, but a damp, sound-dampening moss woven from the flora of the Sarathi homeworld, designed to keep secrets in and the universe out. Illyra stood in the center of the room, her chest heaving, the stolen data slate gripped so tightly in her hand that the casing was beginning to crack. Her mother, the High Matriarch Valera, sat behind a desk of petrified driftwood. She was not glowing. Without the amplification of her ceremonial robes and the adrenaline of public performance, her bioluminescence had faded to a dull, ashy gray. She looked ancient. She looked like a candle that had burned down to the wick. "Explain this," Illyra said. Her voice was not the melodic chime of a courtier. It was the flat, hard sound of a judge passing sentence. She threw the slate onto the desk. It clattered across the wood and stopped inches from Valera's hand. The holographic seal, the authorization for the transport of the Chimera beast, shimmered in the air between them. Valera did not look at the slate. She looked at her daughter's hands, which were shaking. "You were not meant to see that," Valera said softly. "Not meant to see it." Illyra laughed, a sharp, jagged sound. "I was in the arena. Mother, I watched that thing tear through the containment gate. I watched it nearly eat a man alive. And now I find your signature on its transport manifest. Did you order it? Did you tell them to let it loose?" "No!" Valera snapped, her head snapping up. a flash of the old fire in her eyes. I did not order the release. The breach was sabotage, but I authorized the presence. Why? Illyra demanded. Why bring a monster to a station full of civilians? Because I had no choice, Valera whispered, slumping back into her chair. Illyra stared at her. You are the High Matriarch. You are the voice of the Council. You always have a choice. Do I? Valera laughed bitterly. You think this crown gives me power? It gives me a target. 6 months ago, the coalition of the Deep Priesthood and House Vex came to me. They had evidence of our weakening trade routes. They had stirred up unrest in the lower sectors. They threatened a vote of no confidence. They threatened civil war, Illyra, open war in the corridors. So you gave them a beast. I gave them a concession, Valera cried. They wanted a weapon program. They wanted to remilitarize the station to show strength. I refused the soldier program. I refused the orbital bombardments. I compromised on a biological asset, a controlled demonstration unit. It was supposed to be kept in stasis. It was supposed to be a deterrent in a vault, never to be seen. A deterrent, Illyra repeated, feeling sick. It killed 3 technicians in the bay before Jace stopped it. I know, Valera said, her voice breaking. I know. And you let Jace take the fall, Illyra said. You let them parade him around. You let me bring him into our house while you knew that our family signed the paper that put his life in danger. Valera stood up, walking slowly around the desk. She reached out to touch Illyra's arm, but Illyra stepped back. You do not understand the weight of it, Valera said. You are young. You think principles are enough to hold a society together. They are not. Sometimes you must feed the beast a little to keep it from devouring the whole herd. Like you fed Lyra? Illyra asked. The name hung in the air like smoke. Lyra. The older sister Illyra barely remembered, the one who had died in a shuttle accident 20 years ago. Valera flinched as if she had been struck. Do not speak her name, the matriarch whispered. Tell me, Illyra pressed, stepping forward. Did Lyra die in an accident, or did she refuse to compromise? Valera looked away, tears leaking from her gray eyes. Lyra was like you. She was fire and righteousness. She found out about the early genetic drafts of the Chimera Project. She threatened to expose the priesthood. She said she would burn the council down before she let them twist our bloodline into monsters. And they killed her, Valera said. Her voice was a ghost. They sabotaged her shuttle. And I could do nothing. If I had moved against them then, they would have killed you too. You were just a child. I signed their treaties. I approved their budgets. I kept the peace. I did it to keep you alive. Illyra looked at her mother. She saw the fear that had been hollowed out and filled with political survival. She saw a woman who had been slowly eaten alive by her own compromises until there was nothing left but the title. You didn't keep the peace, Mother, Illyra said, her voice trembling. You just delayed the war. And now the war is here, and we are on the wrong side of it. 3 levels down, in a cramped maintenance closet nestled between the hydraulic pumps of the waste reclamation system. Jace sat on a bucket. He was holding a receiver unit pressed to his ear, listening to the transmission Illyra had left open on her comms. He heard every word. He heard the grief in the High Matriarch's voice. He heard the admission of murder. Jace lowered the receiver. He leaned his head back against the cold metal pipe behind him. He had spent the last week hating the Sarathi. He had categorized them all as arrogant, glowing tyrants who viewed humans as disposable batteries. It was easier that way. It was cleaner. Us versus them, the worker versus the elite. But this was messy. The High Matriarch wasn't a villain twirling a mustache. She was a mother who had lost one child to the machine and had sold her soul to save the other. She was a victim of the same system that oppressed him, just a higher-paid one. It didn't make what she did right. It didn't forgive the authorization. But it stripped away the comfort of simple anger. "They are all trapped," Jace whispered to the dark. "The glowing skin, the robes, the towers. It is just a prettier cage." He stood up, pacing the small space. He felt a sudden, fierce protectiveness for Illyra. She was walking into the fire, trying to hold on to her soul in a world that wanted to grind it into dust. Jace checked his chronometer. He had to move. If Valera was telling the truth, the priesthood wasn't just watching anymore. They were acting. The conspiracy moved with the speed of a pathogen. By the time the next council session convened, the narrative had already shifted. The gossip feeds, once full of awe for the iron-handed human, now carried a different tune. "Who is this stranger, really?" the feeds asked. "Records from Earth are incomplete. Was he a warlord? A mercenary? Why does he court multiple daughters?" Forged data began to circulate, a blurry image of Jace meeting with known radical elements in the lower sectors. Actually, a doctored image of him buying noodles from a vendor. A snippet of audio where he said, "I will break this station." Taken completely out of context from a conversation about a stuck hull bolt. When Jace walked into the council chamber that afternoon, the atmosphere had curdled. The curiosity of the noble houses had turned to suspicion. He stood in the center ring, Illyra beside him. She stood tall, her light bright and defiant, but Jace could feel the tension radiating off her. The priest matriarchs had emerged from the shadows. 3 of them stood at the front of the room, their hoods pulled back to reveal faces tattooed with intricate, geometric circuitry. "We question the wisdom of allowing this outsider such unrestricted access," Matriarch Vex announced. Her voice was like grinding stones. "We have reports that he seeks to destabilize the genetic hierarchy, that he uses his physical prowess to seduce and confuse the heirs of our great houses." Jace stepped forward. "Seduce? Lady, I am just trying to survive the week. I didn't ask for your daughters. You threw them at me." "Insolence," another priest hissed. "See how he speaks? He has no respect for the blood. He is a predator, a chaotic element." "We believe," Matriarch Vex continued, turning to the High Matriarch, "that the human's presence is the cause of the recent unrest. His violence in the arena was not a defense, it was a signal, a rallying cry to the lower castes." Jace looked at Valera. The High Matriarch sat on her throne, her face a mask of stone. She met Jace's eyes for a second, and he saw the apology there. She was too weak to stop this. She was going to let it happen. Jace felt the walls closing in. They were turning him into a scapegoat, the beast, the assassination, the riots. It was all going to be pinned on the human. Illyra stepped in front of him. "He is under the protection of House Serath," she declared. "To accuse him is to accuse me." Matriarch Vex smiled, a thin, cruel expression. "Perhaps, child. Or perhaps you are merely another victim of his manipulation. We shall see." They retreated to the safe house, not the panic room this time, but a secure apartment in the mid-levels owned by a shell corporation Illyra used for covert business. It was dusk on the station, the artificial lights dimming to a deep amber. Jace stood by the viewport watching the traffic lanes. Illyra sat on a couch, her head in her hands. "They are going to arrest you," she said, her voice muffled. "They are building the case. Genetic treachery. Sedition." "Let them try," Jace said, though he didn't feel as confident as he sounded. He turned away from the window. "Why do you stay with me, Illyra? You could cut me loose. Tell them I tricked you. You could save your house. Elira looked up. Do you think I care about the house right now? She stood up and crossed the room to him. Jace, they killed my sister. They broke my mother. You are the only thing in this entire station that is not lying to me. She reached out, touching the lapel of his jacket. Jace looked down at her. He saw the exhaustion, but he also saw the fire. I have to admit something, Jace said quietly. What? When the gossip started, when they called me a hero, part of me liked it. He laughed self-deprecatingly. I have been nobody my whole life. Elira, a grunt, a mechanic, a number on a debt sheet. Suddenly people looked at me. Beautiful, powerful people. It felt good. For a minute, I forgot that I was just a prize pig at the fair. Elira smiled sadly. And I have been a prize my whole life. I was trained to walk, to speak, to breathe in a way that increased my value. I was taught that marriage is just warfare by other means, that my body is a treaty to be signed. She stepped closer, eliminating the space between them. I do not want to be a treaty. Jace, and I do not want you to be a symbol. I just want us. Here. Now. Jace looked at her. The air in the room seemed to tighten, charged with the same electric potential he had felt when she first touched his pulse. Before he could answer, a low hum vibrated through the floor. Jace's combat instincts, dormant for a moment, screamed. He grabbed Elira and threw himself backward, pulling her down behind the heavy plasteel couch. Get down! The explosion blew the door off its hinges. It wasn't a massive bomb, it was a breaching charge. Fire rolled across the ceiling, shattering the viewport. The shockwave rattled Jace's teeth. Smoke filled the room instantly. They are here! Jace coughed, shielding Elira's body with his own. He didn't wait for the follow-up. He grabbed Elira's hand and dragged her toward the emergency exit in the kitchenette. They scrambled out into the service corridor just as laser fire strafed the room they had been standing in seconds ago. Run! They sprinted through the corridors, bypassing the elevators, taking the service stairs down, down, down. They didn't stop until they were 3 levels deep in a disused medical wing of the old station sector. They crashed through a set of double doors into an old healing chamber. It was dark, lit only by the faint blue standby lights of the medical pods. Jace slammed the manual lock on the door and wedged a heavy metal cart against it. He spun around, sliding down the wall to the floor, gasping for air. Elira was opposite him, her chest heaving, soot smudged across her glowing cheek. Are you hit? Jace wheezed. No, Elira said, checking herself. You? I am fine. They stared at each other. The adrenaline was coursing through their veins, a chemical fire that demanded action. They were alive. They had almost died. Again. Jace looked at Elira. The fear in her eyes was fading, replaced by something else. Something raw. She crawled across the floor toward him. She didn't say a word. She reached out and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of soot on his jaw. Jace caught her hand. He kissed her palm. Elira, he whispered. She straddled his lap, her movements urgent. There was no hesitation this time, no political calculation. The bomb had stripped all of that away. I choose you, she whispered fiercely against his mouth. I choose this. She kissed him, and it was like a collision of worlds. Jace's hands found her waist, pulling her flush against him. Her skin felt different than human skin, smoother, cooler, but radiating that inner heat that seeped into his bones. He ran his hands up her back, tracing the ridges of her spine, feeling the bioluminescent patterns flare under his touch. It was like reading a language written in light. Elira made a sound low in her throat, a vibration that he felt in his own chest. She explored him with reverent curiosity. Her hands mapped the scars on his shoulders, the roughness of his stubble, the dense, heavy muscle of a high-gravity worlder. She marveled at the heat he gave off, so different from her own. Jace pulled back for a second, breathless. Illyra, if we do this, there is no going back. Good. Illyra breathed, her eyes glowing with a terrifying intensity. I do not want to go back. She pulled his shirt over his head. The blue light of the healing chamber reflected off the sweat on his skin. Jace reached for the clasps of her bodysuit. There was no clumsiness. Their need guided them. It was a frantic, desperate claiming, a rejection of death, a rejection of the council, the laws, the species barrier. When skin met skin, the sensation was overwhelming. Jace felt a feedback loop of energy, her light pulsing in rhythm with his heart. He kissed the hollow of her throat, tasting ozone and salt. Illyra arched into him, her hands gripping his shoulders, anchoring herself to his solidity. They moved together in the blue-lit dark, whispering broken confessions that didn't need to be finished. I see you. I am here. You are mine. The world outside, the assassins, the politics, the impending trial faded away. There was only the heat of their bodies, the sound of their breathing, and the profound, terrifying act of choosing each other in a universe that wanted to keep them apart. Later, the room was quiet. The adrenaline had burned off, leaving a heavy, warm exhaustion. They lay on a pile of thermal blankets Jace had pulled from a storage locker. Illyra was curled against him, her head on his chest. Her luminescence had softened to a gentle, steady gold, the color of contentment. Jace ran his hand absently up and down her arm. He felt peaceful. It was a strange feeling. They will use this against us, Illyra murmured, her voice sleepy but sharp. If they find out, they will say you seduced me to steal state secrets. Let them talk, Jace said. I would rather be honest and in trouble than safe and fake. Illyra propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. You realize the trouble will likely involve an airlock? Jace smiled, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. I have opened airlocks before. I can handle it. Illyra didn't smile. She looked sad. Love is not safe. Jace, in the stories, love saves the day. In my world, love is just leverage. It is a weakness they can target. It is a risk, Jace corrected. It is an active choice to be vulnerable. That is not weakness. Illyra, that is the only kind of strength that matters. She looked at him for a long moment, memorizing his face. Then she leaned down and kissed him gently. I am glad I chose the risk, she whispered. The door burst open. It wasn't a breach charge this time. It was an override code. The heavy doors slid back, and the room was instantly flooded with harsh white searchlights. Sarathi guard, remain where you are. Jace scrambled up, trying to shield Illyra, but it was too late. Armored figures poured into the room, energy pikes leveled at their nakedness. Behind the guards, a priest matriarch stepped in, holding a recording device. Genetic treachery, the priest intoned, looking at the scene with disgust and triumph. The corruption of a noble line. Secure them both, Illyra screamed as they dragged her away from him. Do not touch him. He is my consort. He is a parasite, the priest spat. And you are a traitor to your blood, Jace fought. He managed to break the nose of the first guard who touched him, but there were too many. A shock baton slammed into his kidney, then his neck. His world went white, then black. He woke up in a holding cell, not the gilded cage of the guest spire. This was a real cell, bare metal force field door, smelling of ozone and despair. He was bruised, his head was pounding, and his heart felt like it had been ripped out. 2 hours later, he was dragged before the council. It was a show trial. The hall was packed. The matriarchs looked down at him not with curiosity but with judgment. Jace of Earth, Matriarch Vex announced. Matriarch Vex, you are charged with sedition, unauthorized access to restricted genetic archives, and the sexual manipulation of a high heir to influence council policy. I didn't manipulate anyone, Jace said, his voice raspy. We care about each other. Laughter rippled through the hall, cold alien laughter. Elira stood on her mother's dais. She was restrained by 2 guards. She looked wild, desperate. I claim him, she shouted, her voice echoing off the crystal walls. I invoke the right of union. Under the law of the First Era, an heir may choose her consort freely. You cannot execute him. The High Matriarch sat frozen on her throne, looking at her lap. Matriarch Vex smiled. She held up a scroll. The law of the First Era applies to citizens of the Pact. Lady Elira. The human is an off-worlder. He has no caste. He has no rights under the right of union. Elira went pale. That is a technicality. It is a twisting of the law. It is the law, Vex said. And the punishment for an off-worlder who corrupts a bloodline is clear. She turned to Jace. You survived the beast once, human. You claim to have iron in your hands. Let us see if fate favors you twice. Jace felt the blood drain from his face. The council sentences you to trial by beast, Vex decreed, to be carried out at dawn. And this time, there will be no glitches in the containment, and no tools for you to scavenge. Elira screamed. She fought against her guards, her light flaring violently. Mother, do something, stop them. The High Matriarch did not move. She did not look up. She sat like a statue of regret, letting the guards drag Jace away. The cell was dark. Jace sat on the floor staring at his hands. They were bandaged again, wrapped in fresh synth skin from the infirmary. He flexed his fingers. They trembled. He remembered the first beast, the weight of it, the speed. He had survived on pure luck and adrenaline. He had surprised it. Tomorrow, there would be no surprise. The beast would be ready. It would be upgraded. Elira had told him about the chimeras. They learned. He wasn't going to win. He thought of Elira in the healing chamber, the way she had looked at him. I choose you. He closed his hands into fists. If I die tomorrow, Jace whispered to the silence, at least I die a man, not a tool. But as the darkness pressed in, he wondered if that would be enough. The central chamber of the Sarathi station had been transformed overnight. What was once a cathedral of commerce and diplomacy was now a coliseum of blood. The gravitational plates had been reconfigured to create a stepped amphitheater that spiraled upward for half a mile, packed with 30,000 spectators. The atmosphere was not solemn. It was electric, a darkly festive carnival of anticipation that smelled of ozone, nervous sweat, and fried alien spices. Vendors moved through the aisles of the lower tiers, selling holographic projectors that replayed Jace's first fight on loop. They sold skewers of meat and cheap synthetic wine. They sold dolls, crude, plastic effigies of the iron-handed human. Some posed in victory, others ripped in half. High above, the gossip feeds were running hot, their text scrolls visible on the massive peripheral screens. Will he last 5 minutes? One feed asked. The odds are 50-1 against survival, another answered. The matriarchs are cleaning house, a third speculated. The human was a glitch. Today, the system reboots. Down in the preparation tunnel, the noise of the crowd was a dull, rhythmic thrumming in the floor, like the heartbeat of a giant predator. Jace stood in the center of the holding cell. He was stripped to the waist, wearing only loose trousers and heavy boots. His chest was a map of fresh bruises and healing scars. His hands, the famous iron hands of the gossip channels, were bound in front of him with magnetic cuffs. He felt heavy. It was not just the gravity or the fatigue of the last few days. It was the crushing weight of betrayal. A week ago, he had been a hero. He had been paraded through the halls, dressed in velvet, offered daughters, and told he was special. Now, the same system that had pinned medals on him was sharpening the knife to cut his throat. He closed his eyes. He tried to summon the anger that had carried him through the first fight. He tried to find the soldier inside who knew how to turn fear into violence. But all he could find was the memory of Illyra's skin against his in the blue light of the healing chamber. He felt the phantom pressure of her hand on his chest. If I die out there, Jace thought, the anger simmering low in his gut, then I die. But I am not going to give them a show. The door to the cell hissed open. 4 guards in heavy riot armor stepped in. They did not speak. One of them unlocked the magnetic cuffs, while the others kept their energy rifles leveled at Jace's head. Move, the lead guard grunted. Jace rubbed his wrists. He looked at the guard, a Sarathi male whose face was hidden behind a polarized visor. Do you know what you are doing? Jace asked quietly. You are feeding a man to a monster because a priest told you to. The guard shoved him with the butt of the rifle. Move, alien! Jace stumbled forward, catching his balance. He walked down the long, dark tunnel toward the blinding white light of the arena. The roar of the crowd grew louder with every step, a physical wall of sound that wanted to consume him. High above, in the council box, Lady Illyra Serath was fighting a war of her own. She stood before the High Council, her hands gripping the crystalline railing of the dais so hard that her knuckles were white. Her bioluminescence was flaring erratically, jagged spikes of crimson and violet that betrayed her fury. I invoke the clause of the second founding, Illyra shouted over the noise of the crowd. The text is clear. An heir of the blood may intervene in any judicial proceeding if the accused is a bonded member of her household. Matriarch Vex, the leader of the priest-matriarch coalition, stood calmly across from her. Vex wore robes of heavy, light-absorbing fabric that seemed to drink the illumination of the room. You cite archaic poetry, child, Vex said, her voice amplified to cut through the din. The human is not a bonded member. He is a ward. And now, he is a condemned traitor. The clause you speak of requires a formal genetic seal of union, witnessed by the temple. Do you have such a seal? We were denied the right to register it, Illyra countered, pointing an accusing finger at the priest. You blocked the archives. You arrested him before the paperwork could be filed. Procedural errors do not invalidate the law, Vex said smoothly. The trial proceeds. Illyra spun toward the throne in the center of the box. Mother, speak. You are the High Matriarch. You can stop this with a word. Valera sat on her throne, looking small and withered inside her radiant robes. Her eyes darted between her daughter and the rows of grim-faced priest matriarchs who lined the back of the box like vultures. Valera knew the stakes. If she stopped the trial, the priesthood would declare her unfit. They would release the evidence of the first beast's authorization. They would burn House Serath to the ground and launch a civil war that would kill millions. But if she let it happen, she lost her daughter. She lost her soul. The trial. Valera's voice was a whisper, barely audible. The trial is set by the will of the people. I cannot intervene without cause. Illyra looked at her mother with horror. It was the final fracture. The woman she had looked up to, the woman she had tried to emulate, was gone. All that was left was a politician terrified of losing her grip. Then I will find a cause, Illyra vowed, turning back to the arena floor. The announcement horns blew, a deep, mournful sound that vibrated in the chest. "Release the judgment!" the announcer boomed. At the far end of the arena, the massive containment gates groaned open. Jace stood in the center of the sand, alone. He had no cover this time, no crates to hide behind, no cables to swing from. The arena was a flat, open circle of death. The beast emerged. It was not like the first one. The first beast had been a wild thing, an animal driven mad by confinement. This creature was a weapon. It was massive, standing 12 feet high at the shoulder. With a quadrupedal gait that shook the ground, its chitinous armor had been grafted with metal plates. Its eyes did not glow with biological light. They burned with the red, artificial glare of cybernetic implants. A chimera. Jace watched it prowl into the light. He recognized the movement patterns immediately. The way it dipped its left shoulder. The way it scanned the perimeter before looking at the prey. It moved with tactical intelligence. This is not an animal, Jace realized, the words of the beast handler echoing in his mind. These are us. The shadow line. The beast locked onto Jace. It let out a sound that was half roar, half metallic shriek. It charged. Jace didn't run. There was nowhere to run. He stood his ground, waiting for the last fraction of a second. The beast swiped with a claw the size of a scythe. Jace dropped, sliding under the blow, the wind of it ruffling his hair. He rolled to his feet and sprinted toward the perimeter wall, hoping to find a handhold, a loose panel, anything. The beast didn't turn sluggishly like the last one. It pivoted on a dime, its cybernetic spine twisting with impossible speed. It lashed out with its tail, a whip of bone and steel. The impact caught Jace in the chest. It was like being hit by a transport truck. Jace was thrown 30 feet through the air. He slammed into the shimmering energy barrier that ringed the arena. The field sizzled, burning his skin, before he dropped to the sand. The crowd roared, a sound of pure bloodlust. Jace tried to breathe, but his chest seized. Ribs cracked. He tasted copper. He rolled onto his side, gasping, trying to force air into his lungs. The beast stalked toward him. It wasn't rushing now. It knew it had won. It wanted to savor the kill. In the box, Illyra screamed. She lunged for the railing, but two of the priest matriarchs grabbed her arms, holding her back. "Watch!" Vex hissed in her ear. "Watch the price of your rebellion." Illyra struggled, her light flaring so hot it singed the fabric of the priest's robes. She watched Jace struggle to his knees, blood dripping from his mouth. He is going to die, she thought, panic cold in her veins. He is going to die, and it is my fault. Jace looked up. The beast was 10 feet away. It loomed over him, blotting out the artificial sun of the station. He could see its eyes. Beneath the red cybernetic overlay, there was a biological eye. A golden Sarathi eye. It was wide, dilated with pain and confusion. It is just a soldier, Jace thought, bound by programming, not evil by choice. He could try to fight. He could try to dodge again, but he was broken. He was slower than the machine. If I fight it, Jace realized, I validate them. I become the brute they say I am, and I die. He made a choice. It was the hardest choice of his life. He didn't stand up. He didn't raise his fists. He stayed on one knee. He slowed his breathing, forcing his heart rate down, forcing the adrenaline to cool. He looked directly at the beast. "You do not want to do this," Jace said. His voice was not a shout. It was a low, steady rumble. The beast hesitated. Its programming demanded aggression. It expected the prey to run, to scream, to fight back. The lack of resistance created a logic error in its combat subroutines. "I know what you are," Jace said, keeping his hands open, palms up. "I know what they did to you." The beast snarled, a glitching sound. It took a step closer, raising its claw. "They hurt you," Jace continued, pouring every ounce of empathy he had into the words. "They cut you open. They put metal in your bones. They told you that you are a monster." He winced as a spasm of pain shot through his ribs, but he didn't look away. "But you are not a monster. You are just another weapon used by cowards. Like me." The crowd began to quiet down. They wanted violence, but they were witnessing something strange. The beast was trembling. The red light in its eyes was flickering. In the stands, Sarathi spectators who were psychically sensitive, mostly the women of the high castes, felt a sudden sharp resonance. It was a wave of sorrow, thick and suffocating, radiating from the center of the arena. "What is he doing?" a noble whispered. "He is speaking to it." Elira felt it too. She felt Jace's calm. She felt the beast's agony. She looked at the control console in front of Vex. The audio feed for the arena was controlled there. She didn't think. She acted. Elira twisted in the grip of the priests. She didn't try to break free. She dropped her weight, pulling them off balance. As she fell, she lashed out with her foot, kicking the console. She didn't break it. She hit the activation stud for the public address override. Vex shrieked, "Restrain her!" But the channel was open. Elira scrambled to her knees. She didn't shout a command. She didn't plead. She began to sing. It was not a song of court. It was a litany. The canto of the quieting. An ancient pre-industrial melody that Sarathi mothers used to hum to their children, and that handlers used to calm the great riding beasts of the homeworld plains. Her voice, amplified by the station's speakers, washed over the arena. It was haunting, clear, and dripping with raw emotion. "Sleep, brother of the shadow." Elira sang in the old tongue. "The sun is low. The hunt is done. The iron returns to the earth." The effect was instantaneous. The beast froze. The song bypassed its cybernetic implants and hit the primitive, biological part of its brain. It was a sound from a memory it wasn't supposed to have. A memory of a time before the cages, before the pain. Jace saw the change. The tension went out of the creature's shoulders. The red light in its eyes dimmed, revealing the golden iris beneath. Jace stood up slowly. Every movement was agony, but he kept his eyes locked on the beast. He walked forward. The crowd gasped. He is walking toward it. He is insane. Jace didn't stop. He walked until he was standing directly in front of the nightmare. He could smell the rancid oil of its hydraulics and the musk of its fur. He reached out. His hand, his trembling, blood-stained hand, touched the armored plating of the beast's snout. The contact was electric. Images flooded Jace's mind. Cold metal tables, lasers burning flesh, a voice commanding, "Kill, kill, kill." The face of a priest matriarch looking down with cold indifference. It wasn't just a beast. It was a person who had been unmade. "I see you," Jace whispered, tears mixing with the blood on his face. "I see you." The beast let out a low, keen sound. It nudged its head against Jace's hand, a gesture of heartbreaking gentleness. "You deserve more than this," Jace said, his voice cracking. "You deserve more than to die for their fear." The silence in the arena was absolute. 30,000 people held their breath. They had come for a slaughter, and they were watching a miracle. In the box, Matriarch Vex was in a panic. "Kill it!" she screamed at her aides. "Trigger the failsafe. The human has corrupted the asset." One of the priests fumbled with a remote device. He punched in the kill code. A high-pitched signal shrieked through the arena. The beast convulsed. The implant at the base of its skull triggered a massive electrical shock, designed to stop its heart. The beast roared in agony. It reared up, thrashing. Jace was thrown back, landing hard in the sand. "No." But the beast didn't die. The cybernetics were strong, but the biology, the Sarathi vitality was stronger. The pain didn't kill it. It woke it up. It shattered the last of the conditioning. The beast turned. It didn't look at Jace. It looked up, at the council box. It recognized the source of the pain. It recognized the robes of the ones who had made it. With a roar that shook the transparent aluminum walls, the beast charged, not at Jace. At the wall below the VIP section, it hit the energy barrier with enough force to overload the local emitters. Sparks showered down like fireworks. The barrier flickered and died. The beast began to climb. It dug its claws into the reconfigurable matter of the arena stands, hauling its massive bulk up toward the priests. Panic exploded. The crowd screamed and stampeded. "Guards!" Vex shrieked. "Kill it! Kill them all!" Security drones swooped down, firing lasers. The beast ignored the burns, driven by pure, distilled vengeance. Jace pushed himself up. He had to help it. He couldn't let them kill it now, but he was unarmed. He was broken. Then he saw a flash of light falling from the sky. It was Elira. She had vaulted over the railing of the box 30 feet above. She used her plasma whips to grapple a support strut, swinging down in a graceful arc. She landed in the sand next to Jace, her impact kicking up a cloud of dust. She stood up, glowing like a supernova. Her fear was gone. There was only the blinding clarity of a woman who had run out of patience. She turned to the cameras, to the council, to the galaxy. "I claim him." Elira's voice didn't need a microphone. It was projected with the full force of her Sarathi resonance. She grabbed Jace's hand and raised it high. "By the law of the first blood, by the right of the open hand, I claim Jace of Earth as my consort. He is mine. To harm him is to declare war on House Sarath." The declaration hit the chaos like a thunderclap. The law of the first blood was not a polite suggestion. It was the bedrock of their society. It was the law that ended the tribal wars. To violate a claiming was to invite the wrath of every ancestor spirit in the database. In the VIP boxes, the matriarchs of the other houses froze. They had to choose, right now. Matriarch Vora of Security looked at Vex, who was screaming for blood. Then she looked at Elira, standing in the arena, glowing with the power of a true heir. Vora made her choice. She tapped her comms. "Security units, stand down. Do not fire on the air. Target the aggressors in the council box." "What?" Vex screamed. "You traitor!" "I am loyal to the law," Vora replied coldly. "And you, Vex, have just tried to execute a consort of the blood. The arena dissolved into a war zone. Factional lines were drawn in seconds. Security guards loyal to the priesthood opened fire on guards loyal to the houses. The beast, having reached the lower tier of the box, was tearing through the barricades protecting the priests. "Jace!" Elira shouted over the noise. "We have to move!" "The civilians!" Jace yelled, pointing. The stampede had bottled up at the lower exits. People were being crushed, and the fighting was spilling into the stands. Jace didn't run for cover. He ran toward the danger. He grabbed a discarded riot shield from a fallen guard. He charged the line where the priest's soldiers were firing into the crowd to clear a path for their retreat. "Get back!" Jace roared, slamming the shield into a trooper. Elira was right beside him. Her whips were a blur of light, deflecting laser blasts, disarming soldiers. They moved as one unit. Jace provided the cover, the brute force, the anchor. Elira provided the range, the speed, the precision. They fought back to back in the swirling dust. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't hesitant. It was a dance they had been practicing since the moment they met. Jace blocked a vibro-blade strike, grunting as the impact jarred his broken ribs. Elira saw it. She spun, lashing out with a whip that wrapped around the attacker's ankle. yanking him off his feet. Jace finished him with a shield bash. "Nice move," Jace wheezed. "Watch your left," Alira countered, blasting a drone out of the sky. Above them, the beast had breached the council box. Matriarch Vex tried to run, but her path was blocked by the creature she had created. It didn't kill her. It simply pinned her against the wall, growling, holding her there for judgment. The High Matriarch Valera stood up. She looked at Vex, pinned by the monster. She looked down at the arena, where her daughter was fighting to save the very people the council viewed as numbers. Valera stepped forward. She raised her staff of office. "Cease!" Her voice was amplified by the station's emergency override. The lights in the arena turned to a harsh, pulsing red. "I, High Matriarch Valera, declare the priesthood in violation of the covenant. Security, take them into custody." The fighting faltered. The authority of the High Matriarch, silent for so long, still held weight. The guards loyal to the priests hesitated, seeing their leaders captured or fleeing. "It is over," Valera said, her voice shaking but firm. "The conspiracy is broken." The aftermath was a haze of smoke and medical sirens. The arena was a ruin. The energy barriers were shattered. The stands were scorched, in a ruined corridor leading back to the medical bay. Jace leaned heavily against the wall. His adrenaline was crashing hard. His legs felt like jelly. Elira was propping him up. Her robes were torn. Her hair was a mess, and she was covered in dust and blue alien blood. She looked beautiful. "You are an idiot," Elira said, her voice thick with emotion. "You stood in front of a chimera and talked to it. You are a complete suicidal idiot." It listened, didn't it? Jace grinned, though it turned into a grimace of pain. Elira laughed. It was a wet, choked sound. She buried her face in his neck, holding him up, holding him close. "I thought I lost you," she whispered, when the kill switch hit. "I thought it was over." "You claimed me," Jace murmured, wrapping his good arm around her. "That was a bold move, princess." "Does that mean we are married?" "It means you are mine," Elira said fiercely, pulling back to look at him. "It means if anyone tries to touch you again, I will burn this station down." Jace chuckled, then winced. "Remind me never to make you angry." They stood there for a moment, two battered soldiers in the wreckage of the old world. Down the hall, a group of medics came running, led by the High Matriarch herself. Valera looked frantic, her composure completely gone as she searched for her daughter. Jace sighed, leaning his head back against the wall. "Well," he rasped, "this is not exactly how I imagined meeting your mother properly." Elira looked at him, tears streaming down her soot-stained face. She kissed him, a hard, fast, possessive kiss. "Shut up, Jace. Just shut up and let me save you." She turned to face her mother, keeping one arm firmly around Jace's waist. They stood together, swaying slightly but refusing to fall. The future was a mess, the station was in chaos, but the choice had been made, and looking at the fire in Elira's eyes, Jace knew they would face whatever came next exactly like this. Together. The silence that followed the screaming in the arena was heavier than the noise had been. It was the silence of a dam breaking. The sudden, terrifying quiet of a world that had been held together by lies and now found itself standing in the wreckage of the truth. In the days following the trial by Beast, the Sarathi station did not sleep. The emergency councils convened in chambers that still smelled of smoke and ozone. The authority of the priest matriarchs, once absolute and unquestioned, shattered like dropped glass. When the security forces loyal to the High Matriarch breached the Temple of the Deep, they found not just prayer circles, but data vaults. The archives were opened. It was a purging. Centuries of records spilled out into the public feeds. Atrocities committed in the name of genetic purity. The culling of imperfect bloodlines. The unspeakable experiments that twisted noble DNA into the feral physiology of the chimeras. The station's population watched in horror as the veil of their refined civilization was ripped away to reveal the butcher shop beneath. The political fallout was a landslide. Several conservative houses, deeply entrenched with the priesthood, saw their influence evaporate overnight. Their bank accounts were frozen, their trade routes blockaded by disgusted reformists. Leading the charge was High Matriarch Valera. She moved with the desperate energy of a woman trying to outrun her own guilt. She pushed for new charters, ramming them through a shell-shocked council. These documents recognized non-Sarathi beings, including the thousands of human laborers, as sentient partners rather than indentured assets. It was not equality, not yet, but it was the first crack in the wall. And at the center of the storm stood Jace. He had become a symbol, a lightning rod that grounded the electrical fury of the revolution. To the traditionalists, he was a dangerous anomaly, a usurper who had seduced an heir and broken the sacred laws. To the reformers in the lower castes, he was living proof that strength did not require a bloodline, that compassion could stop a monster when violence failed. He was offered titles. The council tried to gift him a duchy in the upper spire. They offered him a fleet of trade ship. And inevitably the offers of daughters intensified. Matriarchs who had previously looked down on him now saw him as the ultimate status symbol. The man who tamed the beast. The man who broke the priesthood. If they could not kill him, they wanted to breed him into their lines to capture that vitality. Jace turned them all down. He did not want a duchy. He did not want a fleet. And he certainly did not want to be a stud horse for the aristocracy. "I am done with cages," Jace told Valera during a private audience, ignoring the piles of golden scrolls on her desk, even the gilded ones. He and Elira took the only offer that mattered. They took a dropship, loaded it with supplies, and descended to the pale storm world of Iocanthus below. The frontier was a harsh place, a landscape of jagged obsidian mountains and plains of violet scrub grass that whipped in the constant wind. It was not the climate-controlled paradise of the station. It was hot, dirty, and alive. They established a settlement in the ruins of an old mining outpost, tucked into the shelter of a canyon. It was part sanctuary, part embassy. They brought the surviving chimeras down from the labs, creatures too damaged to be wild, too dangerous to be pets. They brought the workers who had been displaced by the political upheavals, humans and aliens alike who wanted a fresh start. Life here was measured in blisters and sweat, not political favors. 3 months after the trial, the settlement, named Freehold by the human mechanics, was thriving in its own gritty way. The morning sun of Iocanthus rose like a bruised peach over the canyon walls, casting long shadows across the prefab habitats. Inside the main cabin, the air was cool and still. Jace woke slowly. He didn't wake with the startled reflex of a soldier anymore. He woke to the sensation of light, not the harsh glare of an interrogation lamp, but the soft, rhythmic pulsing of the woman sleeping beside him. Elira lay on her stomach, one arm thrown over Jace's chest, in sleep. Her bioluminescence was a low, steady hum of amber and soft gold, syncing with her breathing. The sheets were tangled around their legs. Jace lay there for a moment, just watching her. He traced the line of her shoulder with his gaze, marveling at the contrast between the ethereal glow of her skin and the very ordinary, messy reality of her drooling slightly on the pillow. He shifted, and Elira made a grumbling noise, burying her face deeper into the mattress. Too bright. She mumbled into the pillow. turn off the sun. I cannot turn off the star. Alira, Jace whispered, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face. That is above my pay grade. She cracked one eye open. It was a brilliant, sleepy turquoise. You defeated a chimera. Surely you can fight a celestial body for me. I am retired, Jace said, leaning over to kiss her forehead. Her skin was warm, humming against his lips. Besides, the beasts need feeding. Alira groaned and rolled onto her back, stretching her long limbs. The movement caused her light to flare briefly, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. You are a tyrant, she accused, but she pulled him down for a kiss that was slow and tasting of sleep and comfort. There was no desperation in it now, no fear that armed guards would burst through the door. It was the lazy, confident intimacy of two people who knew they had nowhere else to be. They got up and dressed in the practical clothes of the frontier, heavy canvas trousers and reinforced tunics. No robes, no velvet. Alira pulled her hair back into a simple braid, though she still wore a small, woven band of silver on her wrist, the only sign of her house status she refused to discard. Breakfast was protein porridge and strong, bitter coffee synthesized from local roots. They ate on the porch, watching the settlement wake up, down in the valley. The massive shape of the arena beast, now named Rusty by the mechanics because of the oxidation on his armor, was grazing on the violet scrub. He moved slowly, his cybernetic limp still visible, but he was calm. A group of human children were running near him, playing a game of tag. A few months ago, the sight would have terrified Jace. Now, he just watched as Rusty lifted his great head, huffed a cloud of steam at the kids, and went back to eating. A drone buzzed over the canyon rim, carrying a satchel with the house seal of a courier. Jace sighed, setting down his coffee mug. The mail is here. Alira rolled her eyes. Do not open it. It is just going to be more begging. It might be important, Jace said, though he didn't move to catch the drone. It hovered, dropped the packet onto the table with a clatter, and zipped away. Jace picked up the datapad from the packet. He scrolled through the contents, his eyebrows climbing higher with every line. Listen to this, he said, suppressing a grin. Matriarch Cora of the Western Reach sends her warmest regards. She offers a formal alliance. She suggests a co-parenting treaty where she provides the genetic material. You provide the gestational vessel, how generous of her, and I provide, and I quote, the catalytic spark of vigor. Alira snatched the datapad from his hand. She wants a spark, Alira muttered, scanning the document. I will give her a spark. I will send her a plasma grenade. She tossed the pad onto the table. They are relentless. Do they not understand the concept of taken? They understand the concept of market value, Jace teased, leaning back in his chair. Apparently, my stock is high right now. Lady Cora says I have rugged symmetry. Alira snorted, picking up her coffee. You have a crooked nose and you snore. If Lady Cora wants your genes so bad, she can come down here and shovel the beast pens for a month. If she survives the smell of chimera dung, maybe I will let her shake your hand. Jace laughed, a genuine deep sound that echoed off the canyon walls. It felt good to laugh. For years, humor had been a shield for him, a way to deflect pain. Now, it was just joy. The work of the day was hard, but it was honest. Jace spent the morning in the hangar, helping a team of ex-indentured mechanics retrofit an old atmospheric hauler. They were stripping out the slave circuits and installing manual controls. He watched them work, a Tellarite, 2 humans, and a disgraced Sarathi engineer who had fled the station. They joked, they swore when wrenches slipped, and they shared water canteens. There was no bowing, no casts, just the problem and the solution. By midday, Jace was covered in grease and sweat. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked out to the paddocks. Alira was there, working with a new arrival, a smaller chimera that had been used for tracking. It was skittish, snapping at the air, its implants buzzing with residual combat stress. Alira didn't use a whip. She didn't use a command collar. She stood in the center of the pen, her hands lowered, projecting a field of calm bioluminescence. She spoke to the creature in low, rhythmic tones, the same litany she had sung in the arena. "Easy," she murmured. "The war is over. The iron sleeps." The creature hissed, baring teeth that were capped in steel. But it didn't attack. It paced, watching her, confused by a master who didn't demand pain. Jace leaned against the fence, watching her. She looked different here. The polish of the court was gone, replaced by a grounded strength. She had dirt on her boots and a smudge of oil on her cheek, and she had never looked more regal. She sensed him and looked over, smiling tiredly. "He is fighting the quiet," she said, nodding at the beast. "He does not know what to do with silence." "He thinks it is a trap," Jace said, climbing over the fence to join her. "He thinks if he relaxes, the shock collar will hit him." Alira looked at Jace. "Like you did? When you first came here?" Jace nodded slowly. "Yeah, just like me." He approached the beast slowly. The creature growled, its red eyes locking onto him. Jace didn't flinch. He held out a hand, palm up. "I know, buddy," Jace said softly. "Freedom is terrifying. Nobody tells you what to do. You have to figure it out." The beast sniffed his hand. It smelled the grease, the sweat, the lack of fear. Slowly, the tension left its wire-taut muscles. It sat down in the dust, letting out a long, shuddering breath. Alira moved to stand beside Jace, their shoulders touching. "They are all just broken tools," she said quietly, looking out at the settlement where workers were building a new water filtration tower. The beasts, the workers, even the nobility, in their own way. We were all shaped to fit a hand that held us. "And now?" Jace asked. "Now we have to learn to be hands, not tools," Alira said. She looked down at her own hands, glowing faintly. "My mother sent a message this morning. She wants to visit." "Here?" Jace asked. "In the mud. She says she wants to negotiate the new labor treaties in person. But I think she just wants to see if I am still alive, or if I have been eaten." "Let her come," Jace said. "We have nothing to hide." That evening, as the twin moons rose, Jace and Alira sat on the flat roof of their cabin. The wind had picked up, cold and sharp, carrying the scent of alien sage. Jace had wrapped a heavy thermal cloak around both of them. Alira sat between his legs, leaning back against his chest, his arms wrapped around her to keep her warm. They talked about the future. It was a conversation they had circled for weeks, afraid to touch it directly. "If we stay here," Alira said, her voice vibrating against his chest, "if we build this life, people will ask about heirs, even down here." Jace tightened his arms around her slightly. "We don't have to answer them. It is not about them," Alira said. "It is about us. Jace, if we had a child, a hybrid." She stopped. The fear was palpable. They would be a symbol. Jace finished for her. Before they even took a breath, the galaxy would look at them and see a political statement, half human, half Sarathi, the bridge between worlds. Alira turned in his arms to look at him. Her face was grave. "I do not want to bring a child into the world to be a metaphor. I was raised as an asset. My sister died because she refused to be one. I cannot do that to someone else. I cannot look at a baby and calculate their political worth. And I cannot look at a kid and wonder if they will be drafted, Jace said, his voice rough. I don't want to raise a soldier. A Lyra. I don't want to raise someone who has to fight just to exist. They sat in silence for a long time, the wind whistling through the canyon. But, Jace said eventually, looking up at the strange, swirling stars, if we let the fear stop us, then the priesthood wins, doesn't it? They win because they made us afraid of our own blood. Elira rested her forehead against his chin. So what do? We wait, Jace said. We build this place. We make it safe. We make it strong. And if we decide to have a family, we do it because we want to meet the person, not the symbol. We do it because we are ready to stand between them and the world and say, back off. Elira smiled in the dark. You would be a terrifying father, Jace. You would probably threaten the school teachers with a wrench. Only if they deserved it. Jace grinned. The High Matriarch arrived 3 days later. She did not come with a grand procession. A single shuttle landed on the crushed rock pad outside the settlement. Valera stepped out, flanked by 2 guards and a protocol droid. She was wearing field robes, still elegant, but muted in color, hemmed high to avoid the dust. She looked older than she had on the station. The stress of the Reformation had etched deep lines into her face, but her eyes were clear. Jace and Elira met her at the gate. High Matriarch, Jace said, nodding his head. He didn't bow. He didn't kneel. He greeted her as an equal. Jace, Valera said. Her voice was stiff, but not hostile. And Elira, you look... Well, I am tired, Mother, Elira said, stepping forward to offer the Sarathi greeting, fingertips to pulse points. But I am well. Valera touched her daughter's wrists. She held on a moment longer than protocol dictated. I see the reports, Valera said, looking around the settlement. The beasts are docile. The workers are productive. You have created order from chaos. We created a home, Elira corrected. They moved to the main cabin for the negotiations. It was a surreal scene, the ruler of a star sector sitting at a scratched plasteel table, drinking synthesized coffee, debating labor laws with a salvage technician. The negotiations were messy. Valera pushed for house oversight. Jace pushed for independent arbitration. Valera wanted genetic licensing fees. Elira demanded absolute bodily autonomy for all workers. They argued, they shouted. At one point, Jace walked out to cool off, and Valera threw a data pad at the wall. But by the end of the day, they had a framework. It wasn't perfect. It didn't solve the centuries of prejudice. But it established a legal channel for the lower castes to appeal abuses. It limited the power of any single house to own off-world labor. It was a start. As the sun began to set, Valera stood by the shuttle ramp, preparing to leave. She looked at Jace. You are a stubborn creature, she said, not unkindly. I have been told, Jace replied. Valera looked at Elira. The other houses, they still whisper. They say you are wasting your potential in the dirt. They say you threw away a throne for a pet. Let them whisper, Elira said, taking Jace's hand. I sleep better in the dirt than I ever did in the tower. Valera sighed. She looked at their joined hands, the rough, scarred hand of the human and the glowing, elegant hand of her daughter. You have changed the world, Valera said softly. I only hope the world survives the change. She turned and walked up the ramp. The shuttle lifted off, a streak of fire returning to the glittering web of the station above. The night was quiet, the kind of profound silence that only exists in the desert. Jace and Elira walked to the edge of the perimeter, where the settlement ended and the wild plains began. Rusty, the great chimera, was sleeping nearby, looking like a boulder that breathed. Jace leaned against a fence post, pulling Elira close. She rested her head on his shoulder, her light dim and contented. "Do you miss it?" Jace asked suddenly. "Miss what?" "The power, the silk sheets, the way everyone stopped talking when you walked into a room." Elira thought about it. "I miss the hot water," she admitted. "The plumbing here is tragic. But the rest? No. I felt like a ghost up there, Jace. I was haunting my own life. Here, I am solid." She traced the scar on his hand, the one from the first beast's shell. "You know," she said, a teasing lilt in her voice. "I checked the gossip feeds this morning. They are still talking about you, the iron-handed human. They say I stole you, that I used my witchy Sarathi powers to ensnare your mind because I wanted a bodyguard." Jace snorted. "Ensnare my mind? You couldn't even work the coffee machine when you first got here." Elira poked him in the ribs. "I am adapting. But truly, they lament that such a prime specimen was taken off the market so quickly. They say it is unfair." Jace looked out at the horizon, where the double moons were casting long, silver shadows across the violet grass. He thought about the debt he had carried for years. He thought about the war. He thought about the moment in the arena when he had decided to stop fighting and start connecting. "You didn't steal anything," Jace said quietly. "I walked." Elira looked up at him. Her eyes were luminous in the dark. "I know," she whispered. "You chose, and that matters more than any offering they could make." Jace squeezed her hand. "I would choose it again. Every time. Even the part with the bomb." "Maybe skip the bomb next time," Elira suggested dryly. They stood there for a long time, watching a young beast, the skittish one from the morning, playing in the field. It was chasing a moth, bounding clumsily, tripping over its own paws. It was dangerous. Yes, it had metal in its bones and fire in its blood. But it was playing. It was free. A transport rover rumbled past on the trade road that skirted the settlement. It was a heavy hauler, likely bringing supplies to the mines further north. The driver, a grizzled Sarathi trader, slowed down as he passed the settlement. He spotted the couple standing by the fence, the tall, glowing woman and the scarred human man. The trader nudged his companion in the cab. "Look," the trader whispered, his voice carrying on the thin wind, half awed and half amused. "That is him, the human who fought off a beast barehanded." The companion craned his neck to look. The trader shook his head, chuckling. "I heard the Matriarchs would still offer him 1,000 daughters if he would just leave that rock." The rover rumbled on, dust swirling in its wake. Jace heard him. He watched the tail lights fade into the darkness. He felt the warmth of Elira's body against his, the steady thrum of her life force that had become the rhythm of his own world. He squeezed Elira's hand, a pressure that was returned instantly. "They can offer," Jace answered quietly. His words meant only for her. "I already picked